Nilou will be coming to the Genshin Impact server in the later half of the Genshin Impact 3.1 patch. Now, this was previously reviewed during the Genshin Impact 3.1 livestream. However, most importantly is that during the 3.1 livestream preview, we were also given what Nilou do, about what her elemental skill and burst can do, and overall what we can expect from these characters. So, with the information that are given to us, let's talk about Nilou's potential, especially what is some potential problem that Nilou might have when she does eventually get released to the Genshin Impact live server. And so this is Nilou's Genshin Impact pre-release analysis. As always, these videos are a little bit more focused on the potential problem of the character to kind of de-incentivize overhyping on the characters and immediately pulling for them on day one without proper testing. As always, if possible, you should always try to wait a week for Video Crafter to fully figure out the character potential before making your pull decision. Nevertheless, aside from making a updated meta video after a week, we're going to be doing the first impression video of Nilou on the first day. So if you can eager to wait, then you can check that out as well. And as always, if you're not subscribed already, this is a good time to do so for those videos. And let's get started into something I actually really like about Nilou. First thing first though, there's something very important that I want to cover, which is how Nilou could just potentially define future characters in Genshin Impact. And I'm talking about the fact that in the 3.1 livestream, miHoYo showed us that Nilou has the ability to modify reaction, which is never heard of before. If your team only contained exactly either Danjo or Hydro characters, instead of triggering a bloom reaction when you mix Danjo and Hydro together, you're actually able to get a empower version of that or a modified version of that. You're able to create what we call core instead, which are basically empower version of the Danjo seed that'll do more damage, potentially just come out a lot faster and might have a bigger radius. Modifying reaction is something that we have never seen in Genshin Impact before and could create a very interesting path for future characters, as this means that instead of characters synergies between element being limited to the reaction that they can create, they could do more beyond that. For example, currently Cryo and Electro do superconduct, which might not be the most useful thing for a lot of characters out there. If your character is most of the time Electro damage focused, then the Cryo plus Electro reaction superconduct does not really benefit that character that much, and the same go for the Cryo counterpart. However, what if they make a brand new character that can actually change that reaction to benefit something else instead? So instead of Cryo plus Electro's reducing the enemy physical resistance by say 40%, Cryo plus Electro is actually going to get modified to reduce Electro resistance by 40% or Cryo resistance by 40%, depending on which one you apply last. In that case, that reaction will be much more useful to certain characters like Cynos, who mostly do Electro damage and therefore could have better synergies with Cryo characters in general, and that is something that miHoYo can do in the futures. And so I'm really glad that miHoYo is opening this path of modifying reaction, because most importantly, we could potentially see some game changer reaction from the current existing reaction that might not be so good. And I'm talking about things like Danjo plus Pyro is currently unusable, as burning is just not very good. But what if you can modify burning to do actually really good stuff? Then we could see synergies between Pyro and Danjo characters, and likewise with the Geo reaction crystallize as well. However, her potential actually does not stop there. You see, there is another very cool thing that miHoYo is doing, which is that her elemental skill actually have multiple form depending on how you use it and depending on how you press the button. You can either make her elemental skill fully deployable, or you can instead use it to empower your on-field potential, and you can choose one or the other, which is something that really cool. This effectively means that Nilou can be played either off-field or on-field, and definitely open up a lot of different paths for her, as you're just not limited to one or the other. Now, one might argue that Genshin Impact already have characters like that, such as Kokomi or Raiden, where their elemental skill is a full deployable and then their elemental burst is, well, on-field potential, or as we commonly refer to as,
they press one button to put something on the ground, and they push the other button to click for more damage.
The thing about these is that they are usually come in a additive format. That means that your overall potential is always going to be your deployable plus your on-field. The difference between Nilou and the other character is that putting the other characters on-field is always going to result in you having more potential, as it is the additive of your deployable plus on-field. However, this could not be the case for Nilou, as you have to choose one or the other, and when you put her on-field, you lose whatever her off-field potential is. And it also means that miHoYo can can take a very interesting direction where the two versions of her elemental skill do a completely different thing and are suitable for a different scenario or different characters. And overall, I think it just makes her a little bit more interesting, as this means that she would have more interesting pairing to be deal with. For example, let's say you pair her together with a character that is really good on field like Ayato. In that case, you can just play Nilou as a off-field character and use the off-field version of her elemental skill. However, let's suppose the other day you want to switch up your character and you want to use a very strong off-field character instead, such as Xingqiu's. As Xingqiu's is 100% played off-field, there's no reason to put Xingqiu's on-field. And then in this case, you say, okay, now I can use the on-field version of Nilou instead, and it will completely do different things. And I think overall, this just create a really interesting scenario where depending on the team you draft, the character can just do very different things. However, with that being said, I think that Nilou is an experimental character from MiHoYo to see how far they can push these interesting ideas. And unfortunately, in the process, they might have messed up a little bit. And I'm talking about how her passive talent straight up only take into effect if you only put Hydro and Danjo characters into your party. That means you're not allowed to put other elements like Pyro or Electro. And I think that is just very limiting in terms of her overall team comp as well as potential. The thing about Nilou is that her passive of converting Bloom into core only function if your team contain only exactly Danjo or Hydro characters. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't pair her with Electro characters. For example, you can still use her as a Hydro characters in your Hyper Bloom team, but then it just defeats the purpose as you don't even get the point of Nilou at all, which is to convert those Bloom to core. So while it is possible, it's not gonna be the main focus of today. It is effectively saying like every single characters can be played in National. Well, yes, but it also means that the character itself doesn't really matter and doesn't function that well, and well, the purpose is defeated. Restricting yourself to only being able to bring Hydro and Danjo character is a massive drawback when it comes to Nilou, especially since currently in the Genshin Impact 3.1 patch, we only have exactly 3 Danjo characters, which are Traveler, Kali, and Tegnari. Tegnari is most likely unplayable with Nilou as he is a on-field spread DPS, so the only 2 Danjo characters that you can bring in your party are gonna be the Traveler and Kali. And this introduced us to the very first problem of Nilou. She wants Danjo characters, but we don't have Danjo characters in Genshin Impact. Well, I mean, we do, which are Traveler and Kali, but they're both individually not very good. They just don't do a lot outside of applying Danjo and are often what I like to refer to as dead characters, as well, they don't provide that much compared to stronger character like, let's say, Kazuha. Not being able to put elements that are not Danjo or Hydro really sucks, as this means that you lose out on being able to pair her with some of the stronger characters in Genshin Impact, especially the Anemo characters that are like Kazuha, Sucrose, or Venti, who can bring massive utility from the VV artifact set or just their built-in utility like grouping or buffing. With her not being able to be paired with some of these stronger characters in the game, that just automatically means that her potential is dramatically limited, especially when you compare it to other teams that can potentially utilize these really powerful characters. Not being able to use a really powerful character that you own just really sucks. That restriction also make it so that you have to bring some of the weaker character into your team. For example, again, Kali. Unfortunately, it's just not that strong. She just doesn't provide a lot of utility outside of applying Danjo, which is not the greatest. The thing about Nilou is that with her team being restricted to Danjo and Hydro, there is only 2 archetype of team you can run, either double Danjo plus double Hydro or triple Hydro plus single Danjo. And in the first case, it is probably the more common and more preferred way, but it does mean that you have to bring both Traveler and Kali, which are again 2 dead units in your party. Compared to being able to bring a stronger characters, it's just really hinder her potential. While the mechanics of being able to convert Bloom into core is really cool, it still introduced a few fundamental problems with her alongside the Bloom mechanics, which are things like just not having good enough AoE or self-damaging. The Bloom explosion or the core explosion in this case do have a good AoE radius, but it's not the biggest either, and it really doesn't compensate for the lack of a Anemo grouper into your party, especially for chamber where the enemy spawn spread apart. And to be honest, that's not that uncommon. For example, in the past Abyss, we have chamber where the Mirror Maiden is spawned on one side of the chamber, and then the Assassin Mage is spawned on the other side of the chamber. In that case, using a character like Kazuha or Venti to help you group these enemies together will really help when it comes down to you trying to do your AoE damage output. But with Nilou unable to bring any of these powerful groupers, and while her Bloom core have a good amount of AoE radius explosion, it still make me question how good is her overall AoE potential. If we take a look at the current Spiral Abyss iteration, you'll realize that the first half really care about your AoE damage and your AoE potential in your party. For example, the first chamber have a lot of enemy that are spread out, and then you have chamber 2 and chamber 3 that spawn with 4 enemy all at once, so it's kind of testing your ability to damage all 4 enemy at once. Now, chamber 2 and chamber 3 have all 4 enemies spawn on top of each other by default, and therefore you don't need a grouper, and well, now I understand why miHoYo did it. The second problem with Bloom is that it is self-damaging. Every single time you trigger a Bloom reaction, you yourself will be damaged for 5% of its original damage, which means that usually you have to bring some kind of defensive option like a healer or a shielder. The problem here is that as we currently do not have any Danjo healer or shielder option in Genshin Impact, you are going to be forced to probably run a Hydro defensive option, either Kokomi or Brabola as your dedicated healer. This effectively means that your overall team drafting process is even more restrictive as we currently don't have a Danjo healer or shielder. Basically, your team drafting process got hammered down really hard by miHoYo, and while she might have good personal potential, especially with the mechanics of converting Bloom into core, your team drafting process is so shit that it will be such a huge gap to overcome for Nilou. Triple Hydro could be cool, but if you're losing an entire Danjo character, without a doubt the amount of reaction that you're going to be triggering in your team is also going to dramatically decrease. Keep in mind that Nilou's entire gimmicks is to convert Bloom Seed into core, and so it is very essential that you try to trigger as much Bloom as possible. With you losing an entire Danjo characters, your reliance on reaction also dramatically decrease, and so this team would basically just be relying on the raw damage of the Hydro characters, namely from Xingqius and Yelan, and the Hydro application itself doesn't really get utilized that well as Danjo Traveler just apply Danjo. Probably too slow to make use of 3 characters worth of Hydro. And so at this point, it made me question that are there other characters or other teams that are better suited for this, namely team that can really appreciate the Hydro application and just overall more suited to be paired with them. For example, character like Hu Tao. I think Nilou is really cool in the sense that miHoYo is trying to experiment how they can make a character differently in Genshin Impact, which is great, and it does open up interesting path for future potential and can shape how future characters are being developed. The problem here is that passive is just too restrictive, and honestly I don't really understand why miHoYo couldn't just make the same characters without that restrictive passive. In that case, if you want to play double Danjo, double Hydro, you can. If you want to play double Hydro, 1 Danjo, 1 Anemo to get that grouping ability, you can. If you want to play double Hydros, 1 Danjo, 1 Electro to do Hyper Bloom so we can get really good single target damage, you can. It just doesn't really make sense why miHoYo has to purposely hinder the characters by putting that passive in, especially with the fact how we don't really have strong Danjo character right now. And so I think with how Genshin Impact does not have Danjo characters right now, her overall team drafting process is just too shit and make me really question her overall potential. And therefore, I think unfortunately I'm gonna have to recommend people to skip Nilou. Not because she's bad, but because I just don't think she's at the right time, and I think she's coming to Genshin Impact too early. I unfortunately have to give her a 2 out of 5 pre-release analysis rating, which means that you should really skip her unless you really like her. It's not because she sucks or anything like that, but I just don't think she fit into the Genshin Impact timeline at the current moment with us not having Danjo characters. Maybe the Danjo Archon that will be coming in Genshin Impact 3.2 will make her significantly better, but as always, I don't recommend pulling for future potential. Without doubt, as we get more and more Danjo options that she desperately needs, Nilou potential can definitely increase. However, if it is true that she does have a performance increase with the future release of future Danjo characters, then just pull for her rerun. Pulling for her now and then hoping that future Danjo character will make her better, it's a little bit of too much gambling, which I just can't recommend. So I highly advise people to skip this time around, and if she turned out to get better with future releases, then just pull for the rerun. And so Nilou will be a character where you should really just wait for the rerun, unfortunately. That's gonna summarize it for my early thought on Nilou, given what we know from the Genshin Impact 3.1 preview on her. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully it's not disappointing for Nilou lover, but with that being said, I will be doing a first impression as well as meta follow-up video on Nilou as well. So as always, if you're not subscribed already, don't forget to subscribe for those, and I'll see you guys next time.